Okay, we'll get going in 1 minute. Okay, we will get started. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us this evening for 2475 Regina Street Zoning Bylaw Amendment. Bonsoir, merci d'assister à la séance de ce soir. Modification de règlement de zonage. If there is any media present, please state so now. The session will be recorded for internal purposes only. And please feel free to ask your questions through the chat throughout the session. However, we will come to a question and answer session. Next slide, Sarah. To start off, we would like to state a land recognition statement. So Ottawa is located on unceded territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation. The peoples of the Anishinaabe Nation have lived on this territory for millennia. Today, Ottawa is home to approximately 40,000 First Nation, Inuit, and Métis people. La communauté autochtone d'Ottawa est diverse et représente de nombreuses nations, langues et coutumes. La ville rend hommage au territoire des premiers peuples ainsi que l'ensemble des membres des Premières Nations, des Inuits et des Métis d'Ottawa, de même que leurs précieuses contributions passées et présentes à ce territoire. Okay, so this evening, we will have a sign-in and comment sheet that I will just put in the chat now. And feel free to sign in and use this electronic comment sheet to submit your comments or your questions as well. This will go to the file lead after the session. So the Zoom participation protocol. All participants are automatically on mute during the session. If you do have a question, like I had mentioned before, please place it in the chat to myself, Amy Byrne. If you are on a phone call, on a phone line, please press *9 to raise your hand and I will prompt you to unmute and ask your question live. I would just like to note that the recording will actually be posted on the website. My apologies, it is not internal, as my mistake, apologies there. Next slide, please. So I'd just like to go through some introductions today. So we have your ward councillor, Councillor Kavanagh here. City staff, planning, we have Wendy Tse. Myself, your moderator for this evening, Amy Byrne, Sarah McPeak, who is your IT support as well as presentation sharing this evening. And we also have our co-op student joining us tonight, Amber Chen. From the applicant side, we have Parkway House Foundation, James McLaren and Sergio Broco. Windmill Developments, Jonathan Westend, Stephen Savell, Ross Ferris, and JF Tessier. Diamond Schmidt Architects, Don Schmidt and Bennett Hugh, and from GBA, Laura Crawford. So the agenda for this evening, I will shortly pass it over to your counselor, ward councillor, Councillor Kavanagh. The planning process and context will be by Wendy Tse, lead planner from City of Ottawa. The development proposal by the applicant will follow. Then we will head to our question and answer session through the chat, and then we will wrap up with our next steps. And I will pass it over to Councillor Kavanagh.
It's Kavanagh. So thank you very much. Thank you, Amy, for helping us out this evening, and for all the city staff that are here, as well as the applicant and the developer. And of course, to all the community members who've made time during their summer to come out to ask questions, to listen, to hear about the information within this applicant. Now we'll explain the timelines that will happen with Wendy, who is our planner, the city planner for this project. I just want to let you know that this is a meeting that is not mandatory. This meeting is something I asked for because I knew there was lots of questions and people needed the information, and they have the opportunity to see it. So the way it works normally is the public meeting is the planning committee meeting. And that is when anyone can be a delegate to a committee meeting. Now, Wendy will explain this more thoroughly, but I just wanted people to know that that opportunity happens as well. So I will pass it back to them. And I know there'll be lots of questions, and we'll get you as many answers as we possibly can. Okay, if they can't get an answer, they will get back to you. So thank you very, very much, everyone, for coming out.
Thank you, Councillor. Wendy, if you'd like to present.
Okay. Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Councillor. To begin, the zoning bylaw amendment application has been submitted, and the zoning generally of a property outlines the permitted uses such as agricultural, residential, industrial, commercial, and other uses of the land. The zoning bylaw also includes regulation for development by prescribing items such as setbacks, heights, and the number of parking spaces, amenity area. Zoning cannot regulate who lives in a building or if a building must be owner occupied or rented. And if a proposal does not meet the provisions of the zoning bylaw, either in terms of use or the regulations, then an amendment would be required. Next slide, please. This is a location map of the site. You're probably all familiar with it. To the north of 2475 Regina is a portion of the Byron Linear Tramway Park, as well as the Trans-Canada Trail and Ottawa River multi-use pathway. A low-rise, low-density residential neighborhood is to the west. Two Richmond Park Square high-rise apartment buildings are located to the south, and to the east is the Pinecrest Creek multi-use pathway. Next slide, please. As indicated, an application for zoning bylaw amendment has been submitted. The proposal is to reconstruct Parkway House and to construct a 6-story residential building above this, and the addition of 2 residential towers, 19 and 25 stories, are new proposals to the site. A total of 510 residential units are proposed. The applicant will provide further details on the proposal shortly. Next slide, please. In terms of the application process, we are currently at step 7. As Councillor Kavanagh indicated, this is an optional community meeting. To date, the application has been circulated to a number of internal and external technical agencies, and we have requested comments from the public. The technical comments have been provided to the applicant, and a summary of the public comments will be compiled and made available on the city's DevApps website, probably early September. Step 8 is the issue resolution stage, and this is an iterative process where staff work with the applicant to resolve as many issues as possible prior to the report preparation in step 9. If you have signed up to receive further notification, you will receive notice of both the planning committee and council meetings, as well as a copy of the report. Planning committee will make a recommendation to council, who ultimately makes the final decision. As Councillor Kavanagh indicated, planning committee is also the statutory public meeting where members of the public will have the opportunity to provide their comments. After council makes their decision, A 20-day appeal period will begin after the notice of decision is provided. Next slide, please. In terms of the context of this site within our planning documents, the existing official plan designates this property as general urban area, which permits a wide variety and full range of housing choices. The new official plan places the site within the inner urban transect and in an evolving neighborhood designation, which provides policy direction to support intensification, particularly in areas close to corridors and hubs. The site is currently zoned O1 open space. At the time this facility was constructed, the site was zoned P in the former City of Ottawa zoning bylaw, and this zone permitted a number of public uses. At the time the consolidated zoning bylaw that we use now was prepared, the site was rezoned to O1, and it made the existing use legal non-conforming. The requested zoning bylaw amendment is to permit the residential uses as well as to bring Parkway House into zoning conformity. And there may be other amendments such as setbacks that may be included as the site plan evolves. I'll now turn it over to the applicant's team to provide more details with respect to the proposal itself. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Wendy. So I'd like to ask the applicant to unmute themselves. I believe we have Laura Crawford presenting. I've asked to unmute.
Hello.
There you go.
Sorry, I didn't think I was presenting anything.
Oh.
I'm just here on behalf of John
Oh.
Moser.
My apology. Sarah, who do we have from the applicant side?
Didn't receive information on who was presenting. So if anyone wants to wave at us, or there we go. Perfect.
We just have to ask to unmute there.
Thank you, Ross.
Oh, thank you, Ross. There you go. Sorry about that. Apologies, everybody. Go ahead, Ross, if you can just unmute yourself. Perfect. Thank you.
Sorry, I was just trying to unmute myself. So I'm Ross Ferris with Windmill Developments. Actually, James McLaren with the Parkway House is going to provide an introduction, and then Don Schmidt with Diamond Schmidt Architects will kind of walk us through the development. So apologies, we didn't get that all that information over to Wendy in advance. But so I think James would want to unmute himself, and then Don Schmidt after him.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay, I think I can talk now.
Oh, thanks, James.
No problem. So my role is I am the president of the board of Parkway House. So I'm just going to speak a little bit about why we're doing this development. And the reason is pretty simple. It's we don't get enough funding from the government to provide the services that we provide to our residents. It's as simple as that. For those of you who are not familiar with Parkway House, it is a home for 12 residents with significant physical disabilities. They require round the clock, 24/7 attendance to be on site, helpers to be on site. We have 2 staff there at all times. Many of our residents require help to get in and out of bed, to eat, a lot of things. So as you can imagine, that is very expensive. And currently, all of our residents are on ODSP, which is that pays somewhere between 10 and 15% of our costs, if you're curious. Most of the rest of it is provided by the Ministry of Health, but not all of it. We have a deficit to the tune of about $100,000 a year. Currently. And yes, we have had this for a long time, not at that level, but we have had a deficit for a long time. And yes, we have tried everything we can think of to get more funding from the government, but we have not been successful for many years. So I think what people need to understand, if you're familiar with that area, there's a large open space in front of Parkway House. To the west of Parkway House, That is part of the Parkway House land. It is not parkland. Between Parkway House and the low density houses to the west, if I have my directions right, is land owned by Parkway House Foundation. So yes, that land has been vacant for a number of years, but as I said, we basically we've used up all our reserve funds. Right now, we're actually being funded by the proponents of the development to keep us afloat. So we are where we are. And I think that folks in the neighborhood need to understand that that land in front of Parkway House, whatever happens, is just not going to remain vacant. As a charity, we are a charitable organization. We have to use our resources to accomplish the goals of the charity. That's what we are mandated to do by the government as a charity. That land is a resource that we have, and we have to use it. So, and you know, I mean, a couple of houses on there isn't going to make the kind of revenue we need to have ongoing funding to the tune of $100,000 a year for a significant number of years. So I just want people to understand why we're doing what we're doing and what the need is. I will answer any questions at the end when there's a question period, if anyone has that. All that said, I think you're going to find the development that we're proposing has significant benefits, and it is really quite nice. So I think that's everything I wanted to say.
Okay. Thank you, James. I'll pass it over to Don.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to meet with you this evening. Could we go to the next slide, please? I'll try to be quick. I think the first, you heard the location that you all know very well, the west side of the Sir John A. Macdonald Parkway, north side of Richmond Road, with a 17-story and a 22-story existing apartment buildings on Richmond Road, and we're immediately adjacent to that that apartment space. It's also, I think, as was mentioned, just to the north is very significant green space, open space that continues to the Ottawa River, with the Ottawa River Parkway, the Trans-Canada Trail, and along the east side of the property, Pinecrest Creek Pathway, and of course, various connections to the future LRT to the south. One important component of this project is, or two important components. One is the reconstruction of Parkway House to optimize its operation. But secondly, that this whole community is designed under the kind of one planet living structure, which is really looking at sustainability, natural connections, zero carbon construction, zero carbon living, a very welcoming and inclusive community. Next slide, please. This is a view from the northeast, looking really from the Ottawa River Parkway, and you can just behind the viewer, so to speak, is the Sir John A. Macdonald. You see the height of 25 floors on the left-hand side or the east side of the images, stepping down to 19 floors and then stepping down to 6 floors with Parkway House, which further on its west edge steps down to 3 stories, the height of the adjacent community. So a strong transition built in, and very much integrated with the green space, which will be entirely maintained, of course, that is north of the property, and weaving the connections into the community. Next slide, please. This is a site plan with, just would point out a couple of key issues. First of all, Regina Street, you can see on the left of the image, is a kind of point of access and egress for vehicles that are entirely parked both for visitors and residents below grade, underground. I'll show you that to you in a moment. The servicing for the building's garbage pickup, moving, and deliveries all happen within the buildings. And you can see on the right-hand side, the 25-story floor plan that terraces down to the north. And then the 19-story building in the center of the plan. And then at the upper left, at the ground floor is Parkway Forest, Parkway home with residential above. And the key issue here is the green space that runs right through the site from south through to north is, and you'll see a perspective view of that, a greenway that connects to the open park space to the north. Next slide. This just shows the kind of ground floor plan that a loop road that really manages all of the of cars in and out of the garage, drop off at front doors. And as I mentioned, on the upper left-hand corner, the ground floor of Parkway House and its surface parking that is convenient and connected to it. Next slide. I mentioned below grade parking, single point of access and egress. There is really about 261 car spaces that are provided on 2 below grade levels together with services below grade. Next slide. This is the second level of parking. Next slide. And this is a view that with the 25-story building on the right-hand side of the image, these 19 on the left-hand side of the image, and you're looking through a 100-foot wide green space that connects north to south. In this case, you're looking towards the river. So there's a continuous unencumbered green space to the north. And then you see in the background 6 residential floors stepping down to the community and integrating Parkway House. Next slide. This is a view from the green space to the north, looking back. The community is on the right-hand side of the image, the existing low-density community of houses. You see the white tower in the background. That's the existing 22-story building that you're familiar with. You see Parkway House at grade opening out to green space with residential above, and it's terracing down to the right or to the west. And then the 2 residential components is terracing up towards Sir John A. Macdonald Parkway. Next slide, please. Just the kind of detail at the second floor, indoor amenity spaces, indoor supports and residential units on the kind of second floor. And then if we go to the next slide, you see the kind of residential units that are looking to the west, to the north, to the east, and to the south. So views in all directions from the units. Next slide. And as we just go to this floor and the next floor, if we move to the next slide, you see the floor plate getting smaller as we get higher. This is Regina Street as it enters the site. You swing to the right into the kind of below grade parking, and to the left you see covered surface parking for Parkway House itself. Next slide. Just to kind of view a slightly elevated view looking from sort of above the Ottawa River, looking back at the green space, the connections of pathways that connect the site into the existing network, and the low-rise residential on the right. Next slide. And just the kind of view back where we began on the looking from the northeast. I think that's a quick overview. Happy to answer any questions as we get into more detail and hear your comments and questions. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Don. Before we get into our question and answer session, I would just like to call on Patty Murphy to unmute herself. from the Lincoln Heights Parkway Community Association. Patty, if you'd like to make your statement.
Sure. Thank you very much for making room for us on the agenda. And this came about fairly last minute. So what I want to do is I want to thank Councillor Kavanaugh for allowing me to present on behalf of the Lincoln Heights Parkway Community Association. You'll see our acronym is LHPCA in a lot of our communications. My name is Patty Murphy. And for the past year, I've held the position of planning lead for the association. My family and I moved to Lincoln Heights in 2008 when our daughters were young. This is a beautiful neighborhood to live, to raise a family, to retire, and to recreate. And I feel blessed to live in a place where our neighbors are our friends. And we're all here this evening because we care a great deal about our neighborhood and our city. This development represents a big change for our area. And many of you will recall back in 2010 when the proposal was for two buildings, one 12 stories and the other 20 stories, and it faced fierce neighborhood opposition. We believe that the context has changed dramatically since 2010. Housing shortages and inflation are putting immense pressure on families and individuals in our community and across the country. The financial situation of our neighbors, the disabled adults living in Parkway House, remains critical. At the municipal level, there is a focus on intensification and the 15-minute neighborhood, which support a variety of objectives such as a mix of housing types, economic development, transit, active transportation, and reducing car dependency. These priorities have opened the door for rezoning. After news of the rezoning application broke, letters have been circulated throughout the neighborhood on at least 2 occasions that gave the impression that the content of the letters reflect the position of the association. I'd like to review the association's position regarding this development and also to provide some context. We believe the role of the LHPCA should be to reflect our neighborhood's most frequently expressed concerns about the development in order to urge the city, the National Capital Commission, and the developer to consider mitigation measures for traffic, building height, and density, all items thus far identified as top issues in the survey that has been completed by 48 members of our association. The board feels it's likely that the Parkway House windmill construction rezoning could be approved by the City of Ottawa. We recognize that our Parkway House neighbors deserve housing security. Parkway House has leveraged their land, an asset that is at their disposal, to enter into an agreement with windmill developments, which will provide and continue to provide a home for 12 disabled adults who require assistance to live their daily life, as well as an income stream for the foreseeable future. As a board, we recognize that this development will provide much needed housing supply that we hope will include units that are truly affordable for residents of our city. We also appreciate that the proposed development applies environmentally sustainable technologies, such as geothermal for heating and cooling, solar panels, and bird-safe glass for windows. We are working on an official response to this rezoning application based on the results of the survey, which remains open, and this meeting. We urge the city and the developer to meet with residents whose properties abut the development to hear concerns and communicate mitigation plans and strategies directly to residents who could be and would be most affected by construction. In addition, it's important to have NCC at the table because the multi-use pathway and the Mud Lake Conservation Area are within the purview of the NCC. So the windmill plan relies heavily on the multi-use pathway to provide transit access. So what assurances are there that the pathway will be cleared in winter to provide safe year-round transit access? a dramatic increase in population will put more pressure on Mud Lake, which is a significant wetland and an area of natural scientific interest. So concerned residents will want to know what, if any, measures the NCC are considering to alleviate the pressure of increased foot traffic in a very sensitive area. And in addition to mitigation, we hope to put forward priorities for community improvements for current and future residents of our neighborhood. The community benefits charge bylaw and parkland dedication, or cash in lieu of parkland, are tools that the city has to allow increased density in exchange for facilities and services that would benefit the community. Improvements proposed by survey respondents thus far include traffic calming on Regina Street, safer crosswalks for people to cross Richmond Road to access transit. And I have seen a lot of people trying to make the run, and that is a very problematic issue right now. Bike paths separated from the roadway that link up and connect to retail locations. A transit accessible recreation facility for our area, stable funding for the Britannia Winter Trail, and protective tree lines for the trail. And as I said, these are improvements that have been suggested thus far. We are discussing at the board level the best path forward to manage this important and busy file. So we're looking at creating a working group to that end. Our board is also looking for new officers and members in the fall. So we'll be sharing information about our elections in the coming weeks. And I really appreciate again for giving me the opportunity to present today. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Patty. Very much appreciated. So now we move into our question and answer period. So please, as stated before, use the chat and please submit your questions under my profile here, Amy Byrne. And for those on the phone, *9 is the button to raise your hand, and it'll prompt me to unmute you. So those are the two options to ask your questions. So the chat and *9 if you're on the phone. So please feel free to send me any of your questions that you have for the applicant side or the city planning process as well. I don't have any questions as of yet. Oh, we just have one come in. So first question here, how many units, if any, will be affordable? Who best to answer that? Don or James?
Would that be Jonathan or Ross?
Let's see here. I'm just looking for, how about, do you have, Ross, any insight to that?
Yeah, I can take a stab at it, and then if Jonathan would like to chime in with anything else as well. So right now we're looking at two different avenues for a first mortgages program as well as rental program. So right now we're still trying to determine the mixture of rental and condo on the site. So we're looking at avenues for both, but we have not nailed down an exact number to date.
Okay, excellent. I'm not sure, Jonathan, if you did want to add, I'm just looking for you here, if you did want to add anything to that response.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, generally we're trying to target both in our rental program and on the ownership program. So we're believers that affordable housing shouldn't just be rental, because that's where a lot of focus is, and that it's important for people to have an ownership opportunity from a affordability point as well. So we're working with groups like Trillium Housing and whatnot that offer second mortgage programs for purchase affordability. And we're generally trying to target on all our developments achieving sort of in the 10% range of affordability. But you know, and in this case, you know, one of our heavy priorities obviously is not only are we giving the Parkway House funding to continue its up, but we're giving them a new home. And so that is sort of priority number one as far as the viability of the site, and getting them a new home and an annuity that makes sure that they don't have to worry about money again. And so that's priority number one. Priority number two, we'll then see how we can then further go and go deeper on some of the affordability. But 10% is generally the targets we're trying to achieve.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Jonathan. So let's see, we have a few questions here coming in. What is the justification for a 25-story development when the existing highest building is only 22 stories? Who best to answer this?
Short of probably,
Jonathan?
yeah, I'll go ahead. He probably is going to say it's probably best our planning representative from GBA. But I mean, I think it is in the context of, planning context priorities, as was mentioned earlier, has changed. This is in walking distance to the new light rail station. One of our key priorities is creating access and accessibility to those paths. But it just falls in line essentially with city's priority to intensify around those transit hubs. And so looking at what's developed in the past doesn't necessarily reflect what is the pattern of what we need to see for prioritizing and getting the best utilization out of our rapid transit intensification program for the future going forward.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Let's see here, just going through. The LPCA rep noted the importance of a 15-minute neighborhood as a development goal, which is fully aligned with our vision for this amazing community. What benefits would this development bring to existing residents to this effect? We already have green space and transit. Will there be additional benefits from the work and play perspectives?
I'll take a crack at that as well. It's Jonathan. And just for those who know, my name is Jonathan Weston. I'm the CEO of the Windmill Development Group, who are acting on behalf of Parkway House to bring this program to life. I guess, there's a couple layers to that. To create a 15-minute neighborhood in reality, you need density, because if you don't have a certain amount of density, you just can't get the types of services and everything you need within a 15-minute area. So first of all, let's bring in some intensification. We are not, sort of in an area that lends itself naturally to be retail or services. Where we are looking to amplify, A is just the access to transit and utilization, but also in the access. So just the through fare from the neighborhood to the paths to transit. Some of the things that have come up in the past that are priorities, which we haven't figured out, but we're still going to work with the NCC on, is making sure the paths are cleared so you can actually walk to the transit station. So you have a connection through the neighborhood straight through instead of having to walk out onto Richmond and down. And you'll see there's a fair bit of green space and community space that we're looking to create to be, like right now that is green space, but it's really not able to be utilized because it's overgrown and not able to sort of be enjoyed. So within our footprint, we are creating some park space and green space that the neighborhood can utilize as public space and connectivity through the site as well.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jonathan. I appreciate your thorough responses. Let's see here. Just going to the chat again. Will there be an Ottawa urban design review of this proposal, as there was for the proposal at 1047 Richmond Road?
I can answer that.
Okay, thank
so this site is not within an urban design priority area, but the applicants could choose to go to UDRP, but it's not required.
Okay.
But we do have an urban designer who is reviewing the file. So even though it's not going to the panel, there is urban design review.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for that clarity. How many units would be required in order to meet the goal of the funding the Parkway House? To meet the goal of funding the Parkway House? James or Don? Is that under your?
That's probably a Jonathan answer again, maybe. But I think there's two components to look at with that. One for the building of a new facility for the Parkway House and funding, as long that more or less equates to a land value for the type of density that is being proposed, because that's getting translated right into a new facility. But secondly, I think it's looking at it that it's also looking at the sense that the Parkway House, this site is now an active development site. Parkway House there or not. And so we are developing it with the means to actively maintain the Parkway House. But if the Parkway House, for whatever reasons, wasn't able to fund itself, or just chose to sell the site, a same application would come in with similar density, given its proximity to light rail and the city's intensification policies. So it's I'm not trying to evade it. The question does sort of translate to the land value for the density we're proposing, more or less, is what's creating the ability to build a brand new facility, plus a long-term annuity for the Parkway House to sustain itself.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. I'm just going to put out a quick reminder that if you do have your questions, please send to me through the chat. So myself, Amy Byrne, as they come to me, and I will be reading them aloud. Let's see here. How much of the parking will include plugs for electrical vehicles? Who is best to answer that? Ross?
I can take a stab at that one. So right now what we're doing with our developments is essentially we would look to have every spot for the ability to have electric infrastructure for electric vehicle charging. And the total number that's installed on day one will depend a little bit about what parking spaces are sold for condos versus in a rental component, but we would look to have the ability for all spaces to have that in the future, because we understand that that's kind of the way that the future is going. So that's something that Windmill's doing across the board in all of our developments.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Russ. For the city, is it possible to get the city to work with the NCC on clearing the multi-use pathways during the winter?
Yes, the NCC has indicated that they're not opposed to winter maintenance, but it would be the responsibility of the city. So we would have to work out, first of all, who in the city would be responsible for it. And there would have to be an agreement between the city and NCC. Closer to the transit station itself, it might be OC Transpo, but yes, that would be something that we would work on.
Interesting. Okay, thank you, Wendy. Going through the questions here, lots of very interesting ones. Let's see here. Are there any additional roads planned to access these 500 plus units? Regina is very busy and already packed with parked cars.
Sorry, that was, if it's Dawn, could you, are there additional roads planned? Is that the question?
Yes, to access these units.
So we've provided road access to the kind of front door and lobby space of each of the buildings. There's also service components of, garbage pickup and moving support, move in, move out support as service and loading facilities for each of the buildings. So each lobby and each servicing component, which is really, because there are 3 buildings, it's 6 points, are all serviced by roadway access. Number one. Number two, the ground plane has been designed that there is, other than for Parkway House, there is very minimal short-term pickup and drop-off parking on the grade level. All parking moves, all cars that are stored on site, so to speak, are stored below grade. So all the, for other than pickup and drop-off, visitors, as of course, residents would be parking below grade to keep the ground plane free of parked cars to the maximum extent possible.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Don. Just to tag on to that topic, will there be a car sharing program on site?
I'll say that's something that we are happy to continue exploring. We would need to find a partner to work with in that, but it's something we're certainly not, opposed to.
Okay, great. How long is the Parkway House funding, the annuity, expected to last? James spoke of a significant number of years. How long is that? What happens to the residents if and when it proves to be insufficient?
I can speak to that to start. The intent of the annuity is meant to be, similar to what it's a capital base that through its investment is creating an annual dividend and not eroding the capital base that funds that loss. So it's meant to be essentially something that can be provided in perpetuity so long as it's properly managed. And so that is our intent with that vehicle. James, I think maybe if you want to tackle what happens if it runs out, but the intent is it does never run out, basically.
Okay. Excellent, thank you. Let's see here, just going through the chat. I'm trying to get to everybody, so please bear with me, and please remember that if we do not get to your question tonight, we can follow up with you afterwards. We will have the contact information up afterwards as well. Will there be any retail included in this redevelopment?
I'll jump on that too. At the moment, there is not, because again, we're sort of not on a main street or sort of natural location for attracting retail there.
Okay, okay, thank you for that. Let's see here. Okay, every new development points to the LRT as a justification. Can the LRT handle all those new developments? The large number of new units pending at Lincoln Fields. So can the LRT handle the new developments? Sorry, it's a bit, what the large number of new units pending at Lincoln Fields? Can we have somebody speak to that?
So as part of the technical circulation and for other applications as well, it is sent to our transportation engineers, and they review the transportation studies that are provided for each development. So they're aware that these developments are coming on, are being proposed, and they've not raised any issues with respect to capacity.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, let's go here. I just have a few questions that were sent to me, some others here. Okay, what is the timeline of the construction? Will it be over 5 years?
I'll jump in. I don't know if the question is, will it be like starting in 5 years, or will it be a cycle longer than 5 years? But it will be a phased development in the context of part of the goal of this approach and what we're showing its phases is we want to ensure that Parkway House can continue to operate continuously. So it means that phase one, which would be the 19-story tower and 6-story tower, will be built first, which is then meant to house the Parkway House and move it over. So that cycle, yes, that probably will take 3 years, 2 to 3 years start to finish. And then we would embark on the next phase of the taller tower once we've got the Parkway House operational in its new home. So yes, it's very likely it will take 5 to 6 year cycle to build the whole thing out.
Okay, 5 to 6 years.
I mean, the only thing I might just add is that the design takes account of phasing the construction as Jonathan mentioned. So how the different access and roads and parking and below grade services, etc., are designed in a way to facilitate that phasing. And the second point I would make is the second phase would be on the west side. So the first phase is the kind of lower buildings, the 6-story and the lower tower. And then the second phase is really the kind of farthest from the community on the edge of the Sir John and Macdonald Parkway.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Moving on to our next question here. Will any trees have to be cut down as part of this redevelopment? If so, can as many trees as possible be preserved?
So certainly as many trees as possible will be preserved. As we move through the rezoning efforts and into a more detailed site plan development, our arborist that would be working with us on the project will continue to assess each tree as the design itself evolves. We'll understand the impact on each tree surrounding the site, and that information will be available as as we continue to progress the project.
Okay, great. Okay, here. Okay, so we received a few questions by email. They're asking for a bit more information about the 12 current residents that currently live there. Age, gender, years on the Parkway House, and are any of the members of the board a parent of a resident? So is there any possibility to discuss that, or is that confidential? Who is best to speak to that, James? Or
Yeah, I can. I can't reveal, they're private individuals. I can't really reveal anything other than generalities. Some of the residents have been there ever since Parkway House was built, which was before my time on the board. It's in the 80s, I believe. So a few of them are senior citizens. A few of them are much younger. There's a broad range of ages. Some of the residents are members of the board of Parkway House. They have representation on the board. They're residents of the community. That's, I think, about all I can say.
okay, absolutely. That's completely fine. Let's see. Does the province have a regulatory oversight body which will provide annual or regular inspections and reviews? Do the reviews cover issues of governance such as the structure, good practices for boards of non-for-profit entities, and qualifications of members of the board?
We are a registered charity. So as a registered charity, we're a registered nonprofit corporation. So it's really the federal government that regulates our board structure and our constitution and things like that. But yes, it is regulated. The province, on the other hand, is more involved with the provision of service that we give, and regulates how our staff are trained and what sort of academic requirements they must have, that sort of thing.
Okay, excellent. Next question, will the city conduct a traffic study, new traffic lights at Astley and Regina?
So the applicant has provided traffic information, and let me just check the notes, and I don't think there's no traffic signals proposed at Regina and Astley, because it's not warranted at that intersection.
Okay. Okay, here I'm just going through the questions, seeing what I haven't touched upon yet. So is reutilizing overgrown green space to create tidy recreation areas against the natural and sensitive nature of the area? Is this not overstepping the mandate of the development site? Who best to answer this?
Do you mind just repeating the question one more time?
Yeah, sorry, let me just go back to that. Is reutilizing overgrown green space to create tidy recreation areas against the natural and sensitive nature of the area? Is this not overstepping the mandate of the development site?
I'm not sure I totally understand the question. to be honest, it's yeah, I think one of the intents though is through development is to ensure that the natural habitat is had the same or better as far as just dealing with things like stormwater and tree. Like that site, for example, one of the questions was tree. There's very few trees. It's basically a bunch of weeds there in growing some trees and some other sort of natural habitat that does lend itself. So I'm not quite understand the whole question, but it is it is intended to, although it is a build form, still restore and get better utilized and active green space out of the ultimate development.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for answering that question.
And
If there is any follow-up.
Sorry, I apologize,
Sorry.
Amy. I mean, the only thing I would add is the scope of landscape is just within the property boundary. So all the lands to the north, are not, their modification or adjustment is not part of the scope of this project. That will continue to emerge in a kind of more wild circumstance, depending on, the NCC and the city's kind of plans for that open space. But the focus for this project is really on the green space within the property boundary. And that is, more intensive and cultivated landscape in the sense that in some areas we're building on top of parking garage. So providing proper soil depths for tree planting and good growth in those conditions is critical. I think it's also useful to mention that there are a range of different unit types or apartment types within the development. So the buildings variously have, townhouses at grade that open to private outdoor space. They have rooftop terraces that step back, particularly on the 6-story building above Parkway House, but also on the 25-story building terraces down. It steps down towards the north. And so those are larger outdoor landscape terraces. And then, of course, there are balconies for all the units that don't have those kind of at grade or terrace conditions. So it's a more, it's a less wild landscape within the property boundary. And that is the extent of, what this team is working to promote.
Thanks, Don. Wendy, did you have anything to add, or did you want to move on?
Oh, yes, thank you. I just want to say that this site itself is also not an urban natural feature, or a sensitive area, this site itself. So it would, when it is developed, it will require sort of the normal plans and studies, but not protected as an urban natural feature would be.
Okay, excellent. Next question here. Will any studies be made to assess the effects of more high rises on bird migration in consideration of Mud Lake being a major migratory route? Who's best to?
I mean, I could speak to that. We would be, as when we did the National Arts Center transformation across from Confederation Square, there's large amounts of glass to open up that building to natural light, and that is all bird-friendly glass. We worked carefully with some scientists in terms of determining a kind of pattern that birds recognize the glass as a hazard, and there's good science and good guidance on how to achieve bird-friendly conditions in the buildings, and we would be applying those lessons learned to this project.
Great. Thank you, Don. Will there be any activities organized within the community to facilitate integration of the Parkway House residents with other residents? Who would be best to answer that question?
I guess I can speak to that a little bit. As a board, we've been spent so long trying to keep a roof over our heads that we haven't really focused on that sort of thing, on connecting the residents. And that's really something we would look forward to once we get on a more solid financial footing to be able to do those sorts of things.
Okay, thanks, James. For the developer, what measures will you take to reduce the impact of construction on nearby residents, noise, dust, traffic, etc.? And what hours of the day or night do you anticipate construction to occur?
I'll take a crack at that. I mean, obviously our goal is to minimize it. We'll be working within the city bylaws as far as time and noise, and really, making sure when we work with our contractor, because we have not only the local residents, but we will be building the first couple of phases with the Parkway House operational as well. And so doing everything we can to sort of mitigate within the footprint of the development itself. Nice thing here is the soils are not rock or that requires heavy blasting or any of those things. Those are the things that usually create the largest amount of noise and disruption during a development phase. So that part should be pretty mild through this, which is a benefit.
And as a developer, would you be willing to meet on site with residents who have property abutting this development for tree privacy and drainage concerns?
Yes, and we've reached out to some. I mean, obviously we don't have everyone's contact, but we have met with a few and happy to meet with as many people as we can. Ultimately, we are going to be neighbors in different ways. So obviously we're generally a highly consultative firm and doing our best to engage and incorporate as much as we can to assimilate as seamlessly as we can.
Okay, great. Okay, here, let's see, questions that we haven't answered yet. How close to the property line will the parkade extend? Is the excavation solution piling and shoring or slope cut?
Sorry, John, you can go ahead.
No, go ahead, Ross.
Okay, so I'll take a stab at it and then you can fill in any other blanks there. But so right now that's still being designed, but I will say that we have intentionally pulled the wall of the parkade back from the property line with the intention of trying to minimize the impact on the surrounding site, not only for the neighbors to our west, but also the NCC lands directly to the east, as well as the city park as part of the Byron Linear Park tramway to the north. So,
right. Yeah, just, to Ross's point, we're very considerably set back from the property boundary. It varies depending on which side of the building, which side of the property, I should say, and the building. For example, on the west side, we're probably, and I'm guessing a little bit, but we're about 25 meters set back from the property line. On the kind of south and the north, we're more in the range of 20 feet set back from the property line. And it's a little greater setback from the east side. So that allows tree planting on the edges. It allows existing materials to be kind of, maintained and preserved. So the setbacks are quite considerable.
Okay. Thank you for that. Is there any plan to incorporate community gardens on the site to encourage and give residents of these buildings in our community access to a place to grow food and promote green living?
I'll start on this one and say we would love to do that in any way that we can. We are going to continue to explore that. The existing high rises to the south of our site provide actually a fair amount of shadow on the parkland site, or sorry, on the Parkway House site itself. But we are looking for areas where we can do that.
I would say that we've done a number of buildings for example, in Toronto, near High Park, where a lot, probably 70% of the roofscape on a series of different levels is actually developed as allotment gardens. And there are gardening clubs that were, organized within the building. It was a simple issue of making sure there was structural capacity for soil, and then providing, literally storage sheds for tools, hose bibs for water, and so forth. And we've also done that on 2 different projects in Regent Park, redevelopment in Toronto. So we're as Ross says, we're very interested in finding those possibilities for urban agriculture integrated in the building. But it's a great point and question to have been brought up, and however, we just need to do a little more due diligence and homework to figure out how best to do that. But it's certainly something that we're, as a team, very experienced in.
Oh, excellent. Thank you for those answers. For the city planners, is there any plan to revisit traffic flow on Regina Street with the planned addition of the 500 plus residents and their cars? I know we did touch a bit about this, but Wendy, would you like to revisit this?
Mm-hmm. So through the site plan application, we could have, and this is to be discussed, but we could have monitoring clauses. So after build out of the site, we monitor traffic, and if there's justification for improvements, either to the addition of stop signs, road improvements, that's something that could be monitored, but it would be through the site plan stage.
Okay, thanks, Wendy. Let's see here. Is there a shading study completed yet? Who's best to answer that? Is there a shading study?
I can answer that. We have done shading studies, yes.
Okay, excellent. Let's see here. Is there any financial compensation during the construction period for properties adjacent to the development? Who is best to answer that?
I'll take a stab at it. I mean, to the extent that the intent is to not be disrupting the properties next door in the development, then no, there should not be a reason for it. If there's some specific inconveniences or use of land or other things that require that would be negotiated on on an individual basis.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan. Will the increased size of Parkway House enable them to house more people with disabilities?
We have explored that. It's complicated. We're trying to add space, but you need to recognize building a whole new facility is a huge financial piece of the puzzle, in terms of also requiring that ongoing annuity. So, I mean, just in terms of funding, we're limited. Basically, the complication is in terms of the required level of service. So if we added one resident with the same sort of service requirements that the residents have now, then we would need to have another staff member full-time. We have 2 staff members there at all times. Sometimes we have more, like at meal times, for example. But say if we added one more resident at that level, then that would mean we would need 3 staff there all the time. That would increase our costs by something like 25% or 20%, somewhere in that neighborhood. And it's just not sustainable. We would, in order to sustain another staff member, we would need to add 6 residents. It's just the ratio of staffing to residents that's involved. And we can't really figure out a way to do that within the sort of space envelope that we have available.
Great, thank you, James. I have 2 questions here based on the NCC. Has the NCC weighed in on the impact of adding many more people using Mud Lake and other natural habitat? So that's the first question. Who's best to answer this here?
They have not, but I will contact them to discuss that with them.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Wendy. And here it was, let me just find it here. I might have to come back to this. Oh no, here we go. How can residents get a guarantee that the NCC pathway will be winter maintained? This is crucial for those in the development without cars, as well as in the community. What access do local residents have to the site? So that's, let's unpack that. That's 2 questions there. How can residents get a guarantee that the NCC pathway will be winter maintained?
So that's something that we will work with the NCC through at site plan stage.
Thank you, Wendy. And what access do local residents have to the site? So if we can just review that.
So our intent is to run, say the sidewalk that comes along Regina, just continue that all the way through to what would be the connection point to the NCC path. So that basically be a public walkway through. And then similarly, when running north-south, that there's, again, sort of a public access point through the site from there. East-west, I got to make sure I've got my north-south, east-west, right? But basically both lineal directions, it's meant to, there's not going to be basically a gate. It's going to be free flow for people to access and go through the development.
Great, thank you, Jonathan. Okay, here. Would some units be designed to make them more maneuverable for older people or people with mobility issues, like to accommodate walkers or to contain railings?
There is a requirement for us to design a certain amount to accessibility standards. So we will be definitely meeting those requirements. And then I would say the balance is still a bit of a study of the kind of demographic that we envision attracting and living in the community, and sort of designing to a greater degree if we feel that's needed to accommodate that.
Okay. So I have a few more questions left here, and we do need to wrap up with our next steps. So I will finish up with the last few questions I have here. If you do feel that your question was not answered, please feel free to leave your contact information in the chat or to connect with us afterwards. We do have all our contact information put up at the end as well. So I'll get to some of the last questions here. There's a concern about construction traffic moving through the Regina school zone for the safety of walking children. What safety measures will be put in place, or will construction traffic be limited to access from Astley?
I would say too early to be, I mean, obviously, again, our intent is to mitigate as much as we can, but those logistics are too early to be determined, I would say, at this stage.
Okay. Okay, absolutely. And what demographic do you expect?
So with a development of this scale, and you know, Ottawa is still of a market, you're not really big enough, you're catering to a certain specific demographic per building unless you're doing a specific senior. So I'd say for a number of years, we're really cross sector, right? In trying to sort of make units available to first-time home buyers all the way through to empty nester retirers. At the moment, we're not intending to bring sort of a level of seniors care or anything of that nature into the development. So it would sort of be your cross spectrum of demographics that are living independently.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. I appreciate all your thorough answers this evening. Thank you so much. Okay, just going through the last few here. Okay, so is there any potential to alleviate the traffic if proven a problem? If no potential for modification, should this not be a factor considered for the design of access to the new buildings up front? So is there somebody who would like to address that? Any potential to alleviate the traffic if proven a problem? If no potential for modification, should this not be a factor considered for the design of access to the new buildings up front?
Yes, sorry, Don, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, so it is something that we would monitor after build out, and it's something that we would discuss with the applicant at site plan stage.
Thanks, Wendy. And the other thing I would add is that part of the team is, you know, there's traffic engineering expertise is part of the team who have, you know, and have to submit reports to the standards of the city, both, you know, measuring existing traffic activity, anticipating, more than anticipating, engineering the kind of new traffic activity. And we have been working with them in terms of the road design and configuration on and off the site, you know, from a vehicle movement engineering perspective. I think the other thing I would say is that there's a kind of very simple and I guess I mentioned this a minute ago, there's a very simple and efficient loop of circulation that connects all the kind of key points within the residential community in a very compact way. So, you know, there has been a lot of regard to how, you know, vehicle movement is integrated into the design of the ground plan and the site plan to date. But we're always, you know, that'll get further fine-tuned with city response and input.
Okay, excellent. I have a question here. Will the fence and trees on NCC property to the east of the site remain untouched? So to the east of the site.
On the NCC property, if it's on the NCC property, it should be untouched without the NCC's consent.
Okay, excellent. And I have one more question here that I'll get to. Is there an open and transparent process for people with disabilities to apply to live in Parkway House? What happens if one resident moves on?
Yeah, I can answer that. There's a list maintained it's actually maintained through the, what do they call themselves? It used to be the Champlain Lynn, but they changed the name. Ontario Health, I think it is called now. So there is actually a waiting list. I don't remember exactly how many people are on it at the moment, but the type of housing that we provide, there is a pretty significant demand for it. There's, I think, quite a few people on the waiting list looking for housing like ours.
All right, thanks, James. Okay, so I'll wrap up the question and answer session. As I said before, please do not hesitate to leave your contact information in the chat, or please follow up with us after. Like I said, I will put up our contact information on the last slide, so you can have that afterwards, and feel free to contact myself or Wendy, the file lead, as well. I do see a few hands coming up. If you did not get to ask your question in the chat or it wasn't answered, please again, leave your contact information in the chat and we'll get back to you, as well as your question if you like as well. Sarah, if you'd like to put up the next step slide, we'll ask Wendy to go through that.
Thank you, Sarah. So in terms of next steps, please provide any additional comments by August 31st, if possible. Although it's important to note that comments can be submitted up until council makes their decision, but if they're received later, then they may not be included in the staff report itself. A summary of the public comments will be placed on our DevApps website in a couple of weeks after August 31st. Staff will continue to work with the applicant to resolve both the technical issues and address any public comments that we obtain. Those who have signed up to receive further notice will receive the notice of the planning committee and council meetings, as well as the staff report. As previously mentioned, the final decision is made by council, and subsequent site plan control approval is required prior to construction. And it's at this stage that we review the details, such as the infrastructure design, site design, landscaping, those specific details of the development will be reviewed during the site plan stage. Next slide, please. So if you have any questions about the application or would like to provide comments, or if you haven't already, register to be on the mailing list if you wish to do so. That's my contact information. The easiest way to contact me is through email, wendy.tse@ottawa.ca.
Thank you, Wendy. I will now pass it over to your counselor to make closing remarks.
Thank you, Amy. And thank you everyone for all your questions. There was a great variety of questions and I really appreciate them. And of course, there are major concerns. And as was stated, a lot of the concerns relate to traffic and issues of construction, etc., which are site plan issues. And this is a zoning application. But I think it's important that that's why we had this meeting, to get those out and to get a plan of how can this be done if it does go through. So as you've heard from Wendy, it's going to go to planning committee. Did you give a date, Wendy? Did you?
No, at the present time, it's undetermined.
Okay.
Yeah. But
okay.
People on the mailing list will receive notice of the meeting when it is scheduled.
Right. Okay. So so another opportunity to bring up questions, and of course, continue to send in your questions, because I know we didn't get to absolutely everything, though we got a pretty good range of questions in there. And I appreciate the offers by the developer to meet with residents who are adjacent to the property. I think that's incredibly important, and any other concerns. But I hear you loud and clear about the traffic concerns. We have a traffic calming budget as councillors, but for something like this, I think it should be over and above, and we need funding to do what is necessary to make Regina a safe street, and that means looking at things such as was stated by Wendy, things like stop signs and lights are warranted, so they need to be past qualifications. But generally speaking, all those things should be looked at, and as far as I'm concerned, will be, because I'm going to ask for them. So thank you, everyone, for spending an evening with us. And I know this has been important to you. And like I said, if you still have questions, please send them in. Have a good evening. Oh, and thanks to the team, sorry, to all the staff, of course, for their comments.
Thank you all so much. And please, again, leave your contact information and your questions. We'll get back to you. Thank you so much and have a great evening as well.
Take care.